Welcome back, guys. This is Automotive Anonymous. That's the legendary C6 Corvette. It's in the color that I like to call black, and today I'm going to review it for you so that you can decide if it's worth your time and money or if you should leave it at the lot. This potentially might be the best sports car bargain you can buy in 2023. So we have a lot to go over, a lot that you might not have known about the C6, and we're going to cover it all. So we'll do a walk around, go through the specs, initial driving impressions, 0 to 60 with the GPS, and then my final thoughts help you decide, what do you do with the C6 Corvette? Big thanks to Twin Falls Subaru for letting me borrow it for the day. I'll link it below if you're interested. Otherwise, let's dive right in with this review. If you're new to Corvettes, you should know that they first debuted back in 1953. Ever since then, there's been over 1.7 million of these sold in North America. Ever since 1981, though, they started to be manufactured in Bowling Green, Kentucky, and a lot of people actually enjoy museum deliveries. If you want to go through the expense and the experience, that's a pretty cool thing you can do. But the C6, more specifically, since that's what we have right here in front of us, is a pretty interesting model of the Corvette. It's one of the most iconic modern Corvettes that you can have, and like I mentioned earlier, it's an absolute legend building off of the C5 architecture. But what you should know about the C6 is it came out in 05 with an LS2 that made 400 horse, 400 torque, and it could either be mated to the 4-speed automatic, that's basically the truck automatic, or a 6-speed manual transmission, which is the way that you should go if you're going to buy a Corvette. But also in 06 we got the 505 horsepower Z01 wide body model. A few years later we got the Grand Sport and the 638 horsepower monstrous LS9 powered ZR1. So the Corvette for C6 has had a lot of loving over the years. But you know what the country went through during the C6's lifespan? Yeah, it went through something I like to call the recession. So the 05 to 2008 model years of this were pretty popular. GM sold about 35,000 a year on average. But what happened in 2009 and beyond, all the way to 2013? The sales figures dropped down to about 11, 12, 13,000 depending on the model year. That's why you often see a lot of LS2 powered Corvettes or the 08 LS3, because there's not very many of the more recent, newer versions of it. So if you can find one, that's extra special. This one specifically, though, is an 07 LS2, so it's the last year of the LS2, but it has the 6-speed transmission, making it pretty desirable if you want the LS2 platform. These are pretty well sized. They're about 14.5 feet long. The wheelbase is about 9 feet, so it's planted on the road. They're just under 4 feet tall, just over 6 feet wide, so they have a really aggressive stance on the road. Almost 4 inches of ground clearance, and then the automatics have either a 273 final drive ratio or a slightly more aggressive 315, whereas the manual 6-speeds are blessed with a 342. Overall, though, it weighs about 3,200 pounds, and it's basically a 50-50 weight balance car. A lot of that has to do with the fiberglass body panels that it has, and whether you go coupe like this, which I personally think looks better, or you go convertible, they're both convertibles. Just snap your fingers, move the 3 clips behind the scenes, and there you have it. There's a convertible Corvette. The gas tank is located right there on the driver's side. It's an 18-gallon tank, which is pretty dang impressive for a sports car. And then these can be rated up to the high teens in the city and the high 20s on the highway. So depending on your driving habits, final drive ratio, and transmission, you could go up to about 450 miles on a tank of gas, which is impressive. And then because it's a Corvette, you have a staggered wheel and tire stance. So it's a 19-inch rim on the back with a 285, 35, 19 tire, 13-inch drilled rotors. They look really good. And then you can see, because it's a Z51 package, the front is a little bit more narrow. It's an 18-inch wheel, and it has a 245, 40, 18 tire. Finally, this is the key. You can lock, unlock, open the hatch, and alert people that you need some help with the panic button. But leave that thing in your pocket, because we're going on the inside now. The door panel honestly looks really good. A lot of plasticky materials. These were kind of made fun of originally for cheap interiors, especially when you're paying almost 60 grand for one of these. But it has everything you need. It has Bose speakers on this 3LT. It has mirror adjustments, power seats, locking, the button, the electronic button to let you out, and a candy bar holder. You also have Corvette on the door sill. You have a latch to let you out if the power goes out, and then you have a rubberized gas pedal, aluminum brake pedal, and then a rubberized dead pedal. Hood release, gas door, trunk release, ventilation. Those are options for your heads-up display, which looks really cool. And then your lighting stock right here. Power adjustment seats. They're leather. They hold you in fairly well. They're comfortable. Sitting inside the C6 is a really nice place to be. We're going to fire it up with the push button start. It roars to life. The needles dance around. And overall, it's very human-centric. It feels really good. You do feel like you're sitting in it fairly low, but the hood is also low. You can really see where you're going. You have great visibility. Your side mirrors do a good job. And then look at all that cargo capacity you have back there. But otherwise, you have your paddle shifters, leather-wrapped wheel. The horn sounds pretty good. It's kind of high-pitched. You could always change out the horns. And then what is this? This is the Chevy Cobalt wheel. I honestly think I like the C6 2005 Corvette wheel the most. But otherwise, it looks really good. The heads-up display is really cool. And those are all the gauges. That's all you need to know, that this is a 200 mile per hour speedo. Otherwise, you have some extra controls over here. Push button start, of course. HVAC, physical buttons, heated seats, cigarette lighter, some baby-sized cup holders. I'm not sure how this is the American model. And then this is your rear view camera. Anyways, I do like that the traction control button is an actual image of a Corvette. And then these open sideways. They're not very deep because of the torque tube, the transmission tunnel basically. And then manually brake. Up top you have your lights and you have your HomeLink settings. And then the clips under each visor and in the back to take the top off. Otherwise, let's turn it off. Let's go around and show you what the hatch looks like. There's of course 4 ways to access the back cargo capacity of the C6. You can climb between the front seats. You can push the button that's underneath the Corvette emblem. You can push the button that's inside the car on the dashboard. Or you could do what I'm gonna do and just pop it up with the button. It does a really good job. The shocks have held up well, and they do a lot of lifting. Seriously, look how massive it is back here. 22 cubic feet is what you get. And then underneath this, there's even some more cubbies behind the rear wheel wells, but I don't see a spare tire, so maybe fill one of those up with a fix-a-flat kit. Otherwise, there's a handle. It's easy to throw down, and then it locks back into place. If you're gonna ride a shotgun, the door panel follows the same design language. It's held up really well. Corvette on the door sill. Leather, heated, power adjustment seats means our backpack is having a really good time. And then no extra storage on the side of the transmission tunnel, but you do get a lock and glove box that's adequately sized, but there's no plugins in here. Otherwise, Corvette, where the airbag would be, and ventilation. Let's come around to the front. Let's pop the hood and I'll show you what the LS2 looks like. Under the hood, you have the near bulletproof 6-liter LS2 V8. It makes 400 horsepower at 6,000 RPM and 400 pound-feet of twisty torque at 4,400 RPM. You can see your reservoirs, your alternator, your serpentine belt are all on the driver's side. There's actually a lot of room if you wanted to switch out the exhaust manifolds or if you had to do basic maintenance on it. Then you have the big reverse style hood, which looks really cool. And then on the driver's side, you have the battery, the oil dipstick and fill. And overall, it's just a really well laid out platform. These engines are highly sought after, and they're one of the most common engine swaps in the world. But with that said, let's drop the hood. Let's see how fast it is and how it does on the road. Time for one of my favorite parts. I'm gonna time travel and teleport to the road, show you guys how it drives, and then we'll meet back here for the final thoughts. Initial driving impressions of the C6. It's fast, it's fun, the brakes work pretty well. The Z51 package goes a long way. But let me give you about 30 seconds of the boring stuff, the stuff some of you might want to know, and then we'll get back to the fun. The seats are pretty comfortable, being a 3LT. They're leather, they're heated, they feel good, our backpack's having a good time. Just don't go around a corner too fast unless you have some upgraded seats that are gonna hold you in place a little bit better. The Bose speakers also sound pretty good, but you gotta keep in mind that this car is about 17 years old now. So they were good at the time. They're not as good as by today's standards. There are a couple rattles, specifically around the dashboard, as you could imagine. It is a GM product after all. But the black materials have held up well. You can get pretty good MPG in this. Of course, I wish it was the 6-speed Tremec, but the 6-speed automatic is a lot better than the 4L60 from the earlier year LS2 cars. So at least you have that going on for you, the 6-speed rather than the 4. It handles corners pretty well. Remember, this is basically a 50-50 weight balance car, only 3,200 pounds, so it basically feels like the big, heavier punching, heavier class version of my Miata. which I've driven all the all-wheel drive Hellcats, all 3 of them. I've driven the 1,000 horsepower Model S Plaid and a bunch of other cool stuff. And honestly, in my opinion, if it's your second car, if it's your fun car and not your daily driver, get something like the C6, get something like a Miata, get something that's lightweight, decent power, but usable power. What's the point of having so much power? You can't actually use it. Anyways, let's do another rolling throttle, 40 mph. It gets up to speed pretty good. Density altitude's about 6,000 feet today, so this is down on power about 20%. But the automatic, honestly, it's not the worst one I've driven. It's still doing pretty good for being an older GM design. To be able to see your hips in those sporty side mirrors and the bulges on the front fenders. Looks really good. And look at all that 22 feet of cubic capacity back there. These are very practical. They can do a full circle pretty well. And easy to control, especially with those 285 width rear tires. Very sporty. It is a little bit windy out today, but wind and road noise is not too bad. The cabin, I think, is pretty well insulated. Of course, maybe I'd have a different opinion if it was a much windier day. But these performance tires on the road aren't kicking up many rocks, not compared to some other performance tires I've driven. So I think it's going to be pretty easy to daily drive this, to grand tour this across the country. Just make sure you have your Corvette starter pack. Otherwise, if you're shifting lanes, changing directions, it's pretty stable. It's pretty flat riding, which is what you want in a performance car. You don't want a ton of body roll like a big pickup truck. You want to be able to control it and plant it in the right direction. Anyways, let's get to our private road, do a 0 to 60, and then we'll meet back for our final thoughts. It's pretty fast. True 0 to 60 came in at 5.84 seconds. Not bad given the fact that our density altitude today is almost 6,000 feet, meaning this vehicle is down on power about 20%. My final thoughts of the C6 Corvette, even though it's only an LS2, even though it's only an automatic, as that might be the complaint that some people have, who cares? It's honestly extremely fun, extremely practical, and still very desirable. There wouldn't be so many automatic Corvettes if that's not what people were ordering when these are coming out. The fact that you can only buy an automatic Corvette now probably is also a reason why only in the enthusiasts, like myself, I would personally buy a manual. But I get it. I understand why you buy an automatic Corvette. It just makes life easier. It's not difficult to drive around. It's very practical. Not once did I have to worry about the ground clearance and take a corner at too crazy of an angle. It does a pretty good job. The rear looks like it was designed by George Jetson himself. It looks fantastic, and I think these are a very timeless design. But what are your thoughts? Have you driven one? Have you owned one? Are you considering it? I think this is one of the best budget sports cars ever to exist at basically any price point. It's kind of crazy that a few years ago, before COVID, you could find C6s for under 20 grand. Now it's hard to find them for under about 25 in my experience. But I want to know your thoughts, your opinions. Comment them below. If you like my video, please consider liking my video. That small act of kindness really goes a long way in helping my channel to grow. I really appreciate it. And I'll see you guys on the next one.